So Todd and everyone just did a great job talking about a lot of the promises and cool aspects of artificial intelligence. We're going to continue that theme, but also talk about some of the potential concerns and threats around generative AI, and some of the ways that the policymakers in the room today can help solve some of those concerns. And to help get into that conversation, I'm lucky to be joined by three outstanding panelists. From the Office of the Governor Bill Lee of Tennessee, Michael Hendricks, a three-time Grammy nominee, gospel star and Recording Academy member, Juan Winans, and an acclaimed author, astrophysicist, folklorist, and the explainer-in-chief of the Human Artistry Campaign, Dr. Moya McTeer. If my panelists could come join me on the stage. So that was a very insufficient introduction for each of you. If you could just take a minute, explain where you're coming from, why you're here, and what you're hoping to accomplish in your current roles.
I'll go first. Hi, everyone. I'm Dr. Moya McTeer. I am an astrophysicist and a folklorist, but today I am representing the Human Artistry Campaign. We've talked about it before, but my role is to make sure that all creatives, all artists, writers, photographers, everyone gets to choose and control how they and their work interact with AI.
Awesome. Juan?
My name is Juan Winans. I'm a singer, songwriter, producer, artist, and apparently a star. I'll take it. I'm excited to be here. I love technology. It plays a huge role in how I create, and I also have massive concerns about where it's going, about integrity, and I think it's a really broad sort of human conversation that we should be having.
I'll say you're a
and
star.
I love the record.
I'm Michael Hendricks, Policy Director for Governor Lee. We're here because Tennessee was the first state in the nation to pass, together with the music industry, the Elvis Act. First in the nation protection against generative AI stealing your voice, your image, your likeness, and offering you that fundamental protection to a fundamental right.
Yes.
Great to have you all. So Todd mentioned a little bit about the Human Artistry Campaign. They're obviously a great partner of the Recording Academy. We're one of the founding members back, I think, 13 months ago or so. Last year, South by Southwest, it launched. And it's great to have a partnership today for this first ever Future Forum. Could you just talk a little bit, Todd mentioned the 7 principles, some of the reasoning behind why the organization exists and the members. Can you just talk a little bit more about the goals of the campaign?
My favorite thing about the campaign, even though it was started by the music industry, and I know we're here with the Recording Academy, but it extends beyond music. There are teachers, there are writers, athletes, photographers, so really anyone who uses creativity in their work at all is represented by the campaign, which is awesome. And the thing that unites us all is the belief that artists should have control over how they engage with AI. So we also believe in the 3 C's, the credit, compensation, and consent from artists, and we believe that AI has to be transparent. They can't just hide AI-generated content and not tell us AI made it, and they can't hide whose work was used to train those AI models. So those are some of the core principles of the campaign.
Like I said, we're excited to be a partner of the campaign and seeing the great work it does. So after the first panel, it showed a lot of the promise of AI, some of the uses of AI. I think after Danny played around, I think everyone in this room is going to go home and figure out what websites to test out, because I know I want to do it. It's a lot of fun to do. And I have 0 talent, so if it can make me sing like Kokai or anyone like that, that's awesome to test out and play with. But there are obviously some pitfalls with AI too. And for the policymakers in the room, you're probably hearing it from lots of different industries. And there's probably many questions that can be answered. And even in the music industry, there's many questions we could look at and explore. But the one area that we have focused in on as the Recording Academy, as the campaign, as other industry groups in the music industry, has been around the concept of protecting human creativity, first and foremost, but then also the artist identity, the artist likeness. Why is this the appropriate first policy solution that we should be addressing? Why is it so important to put an emphasis on protecting your likeness, Juan? Tennessee's artists' likeness. Why is this the first important step that policymakers should be answering?
Well, so I think, yes, I'm an artist. Artists are people. We might be a little bit more moody or eclectic or weird, but we're people. And so I do believe in the power of art to change people's minds, to change people's hearts. I really think that this generation, this youngest generation, I don't know if they're Z or what the letter is after, whatever, but I think they're much more likely to get in their car or get in an Uber or get on the train and hear from their favorite YouTuber or influencer or artist much faster than they would turn on the TV and watch a political debate. And so I believe in the power of art to move the needle faster than political conversations. And ultimately, when people's hearts change, then the politics start to catch up and the legislation is forced to be made because there's just groundswell. Also, I just feel like we're having a really human conversation. And when you ask me why I feel like it's important for artists, I think it has the same level of importance. And please hear me when I say this. You can no more separate my voice from my body than you can a reproductive organ, right? So we're having the same conversation about a person's agency, about their autonomy, about their humanity, about their God-given right to say what they want to say, how they want to say it, or to say nothing. And I think there's a really interesting, the timing of this is awesome because this whole, I'm not going to use any negative words, but there's this back and forth going between a couple of well-known rappers right now. And I think we see examples of why we have to demand transparency from these corporations, because when you have a deceased individual who has a body of work, who has a legacy, who has an estate, who has children, and then you start assigning motives using their voice and intention and creating art using that person's voice that they don't get to, even if they're being compensated, sometimes it's not always about money. I've turned down jobs, turned down money because I didn't believe in the purpose. I didn't believe in the work. And so I think we have to consider all of those things and the danger that comes along with that. And I think we have to be human enough to know that this is at the front door of music right now in art and photography, but it's coming to everyone's front door. And so I think if we're all involved in a society where we have this agreement that we're going to treat one another with respect, that I'm going to give you your respect and your autonomy, and I'm not going to infringe on your right or your intellectual property, then we have to start that conversation now, because I don't think history tells us that major corporations always put the good of mankind above the bottom line.
Yeah, from a history and a folklore perspective, art has been the scaffolding that culture gets built upon for 10 or 12,000 years. It's been the thing that builds our communal
That's what I was trying to say,
identities.
the scaffolding, yeah.
Thank you. Yeah. No, I heard you.
Yeah,
I'm just
cool.
I'm
No problem.
paraphrasing.
That was
I'm
good. That
paraphrasing.
was good.
But it's really only in the last 1,000 or 2 years that art has been used by creative individuals as a form of self-expression to share our experiences of life with other people. And that has been so good for our society because it lets us empathize with people whose points of views we might not have understood before. So my real concern, if we don't protect the self, is that we would lose that self-expression. And that's one of the best benefits of art, in my opinion.
Michael, from a policy-making perspective, why must your peers in government prioritize protecting individual identity in this new age?
Well, just fundamentally, your voice matters. Whether you're in music or you're just a regular person who listens to music, enjoys music, your voice matters, and your voice is yours. It's no one else's. And we can use AI. AI has enormous potential. But we should be clear, innovation should not kill your voice, should not steal your voice. It should drive opportunity and creativity. So that's fundamental. Second is the time is right, and the time is right now. We've moved past wait and see. We see, and there is no need to wait. We see what potential, and we see some of the downfalls of AI. We see stories and hear stories all the time of how AI tools can be used to take your voice, your image, your likeness. The other point is, and this is something that I heard from somebody who's invested deeply in AI innovation, is a guy named Mark Andreessen, famous Silicon Valley inventor and investor now. And he said, there's two ways to think about regulating AI. You can either regulate AI itself or regulate uses of AI. Regulating AI itself, there are some real downsides to that. We may want to think very deeply about what we want to do in that space. But it's fair game to talk at least about regulating uses of AI. If the use of AI is to steal your voice, that is wrong. If it's done without your permission, without your involvement, and then to share it, to profit from it too. So that's some of the origin behind why we in Tennessee took what we think is a common sense step with the Elvis Act now.
Juan, you know, we saw in the last panel, you've talked about it a little bit beforehand, like the use of AI in music is not, it's neutral, it's a technology, it's neither good or bad. So like, what are your artist friends, your peers, what are they thinking about when it comes to AI? Are you using AI in music? Is there concern of the use of your voice? Or, you know, you come from a family of acclaimed artists and songwriters as well. Like, are you worried about people mistreating that identity and the state of your family? And
it is a concern. It is a concern because, you know, the older I get, I think more and more about legacy. And that probably has a lot to do with, like, I have a 13-year-old girl. I'm like, well, what sort of world do I want her to grow up in? How do I want her to view herself in that world? And so I think about this a lot. In my family, I come from a gospel music family, and they all make music, and yeah, for a long time. And so that is a large catalog. And there was a reference made, I think, by Danny earlier. I really enjoyed that. I'm not that deep in the AI creative process. I'm more of, yeah. So, but I thought it was phenomenal. I do use a couple of those tools, and I think that they're great. What I commend is that these companies are making a point to compensate the people whose talent and voices they are using. To me, that's, once you do that, you've answered a lot of the questions, and you're working and operating with integrity, and that's the biggest thing for me. I am concerned that if we don't do the work now, then it can get away from us, and then we don't have the chance to catch up. And so many people have already been kind of mistreated that there's no way to go back and compensate them. I think that if we are taking, for instance, if I think about a BB and CeCe Winans song, I don't think it's right to be able to feed that song into an algorithm and strip away the vocals and use the guitar that somebody played 20 years ago and not compensate that player or not compensate the composer. I think that those are things we just have to be really mindful of. And it all goes back to transparency, like Dr. Moya was saying. If the companies are not willing to kind of open up the black box and let us look in and see how is this being made, what prompts are you giving it, because there are countless individuals who made Motown records, countless individuals who made stuff, and those people often, because of the way the record industry was set up then, weren't fairly compensated then. And so now it just is a cycle, and it happens over and over. But we have the opportunity, the same way you can feed an algorithm and give it prompts, you can track it. And that's all we're saying. The same science you can use to track it and say, oh, Juan did this in 1999. I have been working since the 90s. Don't tell nobody else outside of this room. And he deserves to be compensated for his role in our new technology.
Are you hearing similar through the campaign, like this concern and proliferation of?
Yeah, concern and excitement. I've talked to some artists who are really excited to see how they can play with it. But even the artists who are excited still have concerns that it will be used unfairly to misappropriate their voice and likeness, and that's valid. That's a valid concern because it's already happening. So yeah, there's a wide range of opinions.
I will say this too, and this is my take on social media. You know, one reason we held off on, we're still holding off on my 13-year-old having social media, is it clicked for me when I saw this film. I forget what it was. It's social something, experiment maybe, I'm not sure. Do you know what it is?
Not the Social Network.
No, it wasn't a social, but it was essentially a documentary about the advent of social media and all, like, how suicide rates among young girls has gone up 300% since the advent of Facebook, and like really, really alarming numbers that as a parent, I'm trying to pay attention to at least. And so holding off is purposeful because I think we have to, again, go back to how we are relating to one another as human beings. And it's not always about money, it's not always about compensation, but it's about being respectful and mindful. And yeah, I'm excited about it, but I am concerned. I am.
So to shift from the promise and the concern and the threats to tangible action and what we can do in this room together to harness AI for the good and the ethical ways, there's policy out there that can be crafted. And Michael, I'll put you on the spot because I think proof of concept is the best way to explain policy, and nobody in the world has done what you've done. So can you talk about the Elvis Act?
What we've done.
What
Yeah.
we've all done,
Yeah.
well,
Yeah.
but mostly you and the governor. So talk about the Elvis Act, which is an acronym for Ensuring Likeness, Image, Voice Security, the first bill of its kind in the world to protect explicitly digital replicas for artists from having their identity be misused by digital replicas, I should say. Talk about that bill, what it does, and more importantly, why did your boss, the governor of Tennessee, make this such a priority over the last 9-10 months?
So the origins of the Elvis Act in some respects actually go back to the 80s, mid-80s. So Elvis had passed away, and the Elvis estate, so this is an artist whose value continued after their death, right? This is actually very, very important. The value of what you create and the value of your voice lives on. And that value lived on for Elvis. And the Elvis estate was recognizing that they just didn't have the tools to protect his legacy and his art and his voice. So in 1984, we passed Tennessee's Right of Publicity Act that protect essentially his name, image, and likeness, offered that kind of intellectual property protections, and offered it after Elvis had died. Fast forward to today, and we recognize there was an opportunity to update our right of publicity law for the AI age. That there was an opportunity, I think, not just to say, we're going to protect your name, your image, and likeness, but also protect your voice, common sense edition, and we can use the structure of this law and the case law that had come with it as a sure foundation. And by the way, right of publicity law, I think there's something like 19 states that have some form of a right of publicity law, but it does not operate at the federal level. There's other forms of intellectual property protections at the federal level, but this is a form of protection that exists solely at the state level. So it seemed like common sense for states to act. And indeed, I would argue to act as laboratories of democracy, examples for other states and for the federal government, common sense. So what we did was added protections for your voice, but also in the spirit of updating it for the AI age, also talked about the creation of the AI thing and the tools and algorithms behind it, and then also the sharing of the thing. And then we're very specific. We're not going after the general models, the chat GPTs per se. We also want to be very careful to not stifle innovation. Going back to the dichotomy of, are we regulating AI or are we regulating the use of AI? We wanted to be very specific. If you're creating a tool or algorithm to steal your voice, that's bad. And if you're sharing this as a stolen voice with full knowledge of what's going on, and it's a very particular individual that you're stealing from, that also is bad. And then we added in, we think, are common sense protections. There's a long sense of protections available under first of all, protections of the First Amendment. First Amendment applies, and we stipulated that. We made that very, very clear. First Amendment law offers protections, but this also doesn't apply to news, to biopics, to satire. This is all, again, common sense stuff, but we wanted to proactively assert that. And then we also, because we're updating this entire law, using the same foundation, we made sure that it was very clear that these new protections also exist after you pass away. So it was a very short and sweet bill. We think that's also very important for this sticking around for a long time. And we think that it was a common sense move. It wasn't necessarily easy to get across the finish line, but I'll tell you this, it passed unanimously. There's not much that passes unanimously these days in politics, where left and right comes together. Yeah, anywhere, especially in Tennessee. But you know what? Everybody came together and said, this makes sense. And when we were all Democrats, Republicans at Robert's Western World and Broadway, this historic honky-tonk. Honky-tonk, by the way, that the governor and his wife love to go on date night to, and they'll sneak in the back, even today, and just listen to music. The governor signed that bill with artists there. Luke Bryan was there, Chris Jansen, a bunch of other artists of all kind of backgrounds. Songwriters were there. in Tennessee, we have probably the largest concentration of music industry jobs of any state in the country. So it does matter to our economy, but it also just matters to just regular Tennesseans too. You know, if somebody's going to take your name, image, likeness, voice and create some deep fake whatever from that without your consent and to try to defame you even, you now have protections in Tennessee. I think that matters. The governor believes that matters to the music industry, matters to Tennessee. I think it matters to everybody. And now we can be the first state in the nation to offer that protection. We shouldn't be the last.
I ask myself, like, how does this play out? I can think about the past few years and the rapid, it seems like it's profoundly fast, like the technology is moving really quickly. And so I wonder how this plays out in 4 or 5 years for the average person as it becomes more accessible and more pervasive and potentially even more nefarious in its uses. Like, how does this play out between couples, or how does this play out between business partners? And no, you did say this in the meeting and I have a recording. It's like, well, I never said that. No, this is your voice. How do those things factor in? And I earlier, when I was talking about the whole social thing and I lost my train of thought, to me, that decision was made when the people who were behind inventing the platforms wouldn't let their kids use it. That's when I was like, well, hold on one second. You making this for my kids, but your kids are not allowed to use it? Or you're making this AI model, but you're also concerned that it could lead to extinction? Like, to me, those things are real conversations happening in Silicon Valley. And if they're concerned about it, then I think we should be concerned about it as well. And also optimistic.
Absolutely. And one of the things, Michael, you said, and it kind of leads into what Juan was just talking about, is the concept of the Elvis Act serving as an example for other states and maybe the federal government to adopt. And it's something that the campaign, the Recording Academy, others in the industry are definitely focused on. Danny didn't mention it, but she testified 2 months ago in the state of Illinois on a similar type bill to protect and modernize the state of Illinois' right to publicity law. And just this week, a couple miles from here, the US Senate held a hearing on a very similar bill called the No Fakes Act, which would create the very first ever federal right of publicity. So can you talk a little bit more about, not necessarily the next steps of the legislative process, we all know that, there's policymakers here, but what are we doing as an industry, as a campaign, to keep this ball moving so that Tennessee is not just out there as an island and the only one getting things done, but we need to get things done everywhere?
I can say that we're pointing at the Elvis Act as a good example for people to follow, and trying to get the word out about the No AI Frauds Act and the No Fakes Act, because people need to know about it to support it. And these are acts that people are trying to make seem more complicated than they actually are by making AI seem more complicated than it actually is. And so one of the things that the campaign is doing is education, talking to people about how AI works and how it can impact their lives and why these bills are so necessary.
And on the complicated angle, I think Michael definitely understands the differing of opinions that have emerged around the concept of right publicity. We saw it this week in the Senate. There was witnesses who opposed the concept. You saw it in the drafting of the Elvis Act. We've seen it in other states. How did you all go about navigating, not just navigating it and moving a bill, but getting it unanimous? Are there lessons learned that we can apply here in DC for the people that work on Capitol Hill in this room or in other states?
The fact that we're having a conversation about this, and even that there's criticism, I think is healthy. I think that's good. If we're going to create something that's innovative policy, there's going to be pushback, there's going to be opposition, there's going to be conversations about, this is what we want, this is what you're concerned about, let's try to find an area of agreement. I think that there's been a lot of, concerns, hypotheticals raised about what measures like this could do or not do. I think a lot of those hypotheticals are just that they are hypothetical. One of the things that happens when we pass legislation is we see it play out in reality, and we learn from it. Other states will learn, we'll learn. That's good. We do know, though, that while there's opposition, our right of publicity law, what we're updating, has been around since the 80s. You know, some of the concerns that were raised was about language that we've had for generations, and none of the bad hypotheticals happened. This is, again, I think a common sense measure. But you know, we engaged in our partners in the Elvis Act. We engaged in a lot of conversation over a long period of time to try to get this right, and we talked with everybody, both sides of the aisle, and made sure that we were you know, as much in agreement as possible. But I'll say this: one of the crucial parts of getting this passed was not necessarily, you know, First Amendment lawyers coming in and testifying, although that was crucial. Thank you to all who did that. I'm not a First Amendment lawyer. What was actually crucial, I think, was real artists, real human artists coming in and testifying. And they came in for our subcommittees, our committees. These are folks who are like, I've never darkened the door of a committee room before. I'm like, God bless you. It's not fun, but they did it. I mean, we had singers, we had actors, we had just everybody. It was incredible. And it was their stories that I think moved lawmakers the most and said, that's why we're here. That's why this is worth doing. And I think that ultimately makes the difference. It's the human voices, it's the human artistry.
You said it.
You said it. And Juan, you've lived it. I mean, you are no stranger to advocacy. You've done meetings on Capitol Hill with lawmakers. You've done other sort of advocacy efforts. So for the artists maybe in the room, music makers in the room who might be on the fence or skeptical about what Michael just said about getting the job done, can you just talk about your lived experience as a music advocate and how you've seen it benefit?
Yeah, absolutely. Being able, you know, having the privilege of spending time on the Hill with the Academy has been really helpful for me to understand more of the process. It does take time. That is maybe not the artist's strong suit. Like we want the thing to happen. So I'm that way, I know. But it's a long journey. It takes time. And I would say to artists, make noise. Like, use your platform to draw attention to this issue. Knowing that you can have a really positive effect. Like it's not over and done yet. Like this is not something that we have lost our stake in. And I think the Elvis Act is a really good indication of how much good can be done in this area. And so I would say use your platform, use your voice, use your creativity, use your art to continue making that point. Because as Dr. Moya said, the more people know about it and are talking about it and we're shining the light, I think the better chance we have at getting a mutually beneficial outcome and something that serves everyone. And I think what's beautiful to me is I think artists, as we have throughout history, we have an opportunity by joining forces with the astrophysicists and all of the, you know, to set precedent for other industries, because this is going to the medical industry, this is going to farmers, like everybody will be impacted by this, but we do have an opportunity to lift our voice and to kind of to make way for that to be fair for millions and millions of other people. And I think that that's a great and rare opportunity.
Awesome. Moya, how can people in this room get involved with the campaign? Are there opportunities for artists to lend their voice in support of no AI frauds or no fakes or whatever other state bill? What can we do to connect you with them and vice versa?
Yeah, that's a great question. We've been working over time to build up more ways for individual artists to get engaged instead of creative organizations as a whole. But I would say follow the campaign, Human Artistry Campaign or Human Artistry, and the website is humanartistrycampaign.com, and that's where you can stay aware of what the campaign is doing.
And I'm being told in the back we have some potential Q&A opportunities here. So quick scan before we wrap up to our final questions. Does anyone have any questions for any of the panelists on the stage? Let's go.
I didn't hear the question. I'm sorry.
How involved was the estate of Elvis Presley in the passage of the Elvis Act?
So they actually were involved in many respects. So first of all, we got their permission to name it the Elvis Act. That was crucial.
It would be ironic if we did it.
Yeah, that's right. So we did, and they were actually very, very helpful, very supportive. I believe they were there at the signing too. And I know that the governor is going to be making he is going to be starting a tour, I think, next week of the state. To go to different parts of the state. You know, there's different musical traditions all across every corner of Tennessee. West, middle, east, very different, very unique, and very beautiful, all of it. And so he's going to pay respect not only to the legacy of Elvis, but of many other artists too. No, they did not. But they were, I'll just say, by lending the name of Elvis, they testified in other ways.
But at least 5 or 6 artists, songwriters did testify, as you mentioned.
Absolutely. Everybody from singer-songwriters, Matt Maher, to the co-founder of the band Evanescence, to, Jamie Moore.
Chrissy Metz.
Chrissy, yeah, that's right. So many Natalie Grant, just an incredible mix of artists, yeah.
Two questions. Back-to-back questions.
So thank you for this discussion. I think it's been extremely informative and everybody's learning a lot. I'm very curious, especially when you try to protect the human creator and the rights, how are we addressing that the technology itself doesn't have transparency? So there's a black box with the neural networks. When you put in the inputs, you get the outputs. There is no transparency to see who was influenced or how the material was created. Are we addressing that in any holistic way?
Well, I think that's the hope, is that we start to create policy that demands people kind of open up that box and show us, like, how are you doing this? What prompts are you giving? Are you saying, I want a song that sounds like, the Beatles and Smokey Robinson, made a song with, I don't know, Rihanna? Like, if you're doing that, then we have to talk about what songs did you feed in? Because now each individual song has multiple composers and people who should be interested in whatever that revenue is or involved in it. And so our hope is that the policy and the legislation reflects and kind of demands that level of transparency.
Yeah, one of the campaign's main principles is transparency, so that's definitely regulation that we're going to try to get put in place. But I think another thing we need to have in place before that works is some understanding across the divide between the tech people and the artists. From the tech people's perspective, I think art just looks like a series of decisions that you make. They don't understand how creative it is. And from an artist's perspective, as a creative writer, I think a lot of people think that science is also just a series of decisions. I don't think they realize how creative science is. And so if both of these sides could see how the other actually does their job and recognize that there's creativity in all of it and there is executive decision making in all of it, then we would be in a better position for the AI algorithms, for the AI companies to feel, I think, safer sharing the black box model.
And I'll just add, in the spirit of the first panel, there's a lot that innovation and AI can do for good in this realm.
Yeah, some AI companies like BandLab have committed to the ethical and responsible practices.
And I'll also just note that there are some legislative attempts that would force transparency and record keeping. There's also a very dense Copyright Office study ongoing right now that's at the direction of the president that has many questions that are going to be on sort of the record keeping side of things and some of those important questions. So I'd say Congress and the administration are looking out for those very same kind of questions.
Thank you for a wonderful presentation. I had a question about, for example, if I hear Elvis downstairs in the bar, I know what Elvis sounds like, right? But if someone has already synthesized and made a lot of different prompt engineering injections into an Elvis track, how do you determine that it actually is an Elvis track? If you go to a court of law, something could be very subjective, right? You could say, yeah, that sounds exactly like Elvis. Someone else might say, no, that sounds nowhere like Elvis. So that's the first question. And the second question is, in terms of the international landscape, do you see other countries, or for example, the European Union actually having certain laws, legislation put in to the same effect? Thank you.
I will say, as a person who listens to music, it's my job. I did not, when Danny did when you all did the thing earlier where you played, you sang into it and then it gave you the female voice. It's amazing that artist was compensated with the click of a button, right? But I will tell you, I could not hear the sonic difference in the two voices. I couldn't hear it. the inflections were the same, the tone was, and so to your point, I think it's difficult now, but as the technology gets better, it will get increasingly difficult. So I think that is something to think about. But
I was just going to say one of the goals of the Elvis Act was to set guardrails, common sense guardrails, and then we'll have a chance over time as the technology iterates, as cases evolve, to be able to make these what will likely be increasingly tough determinations. But by setting the guardrails, we can set the sort of terms of understanding how to weigh whether it's 100% Elvis, 80% Elvis, what does that look like, and how do we adjudicate that? By setting these guardrails, we are, I think, much farther along in answering those questions.
Yeah, there's a difference. There's a distinction that has to be made between, can the human ear tell that this isn't actually Elvis, or can a computer tell that this isn't actually Elvis? Because when you're comparing the waveforms, like the shape of the signal on a computer screen, you'll be able to tell the difference much more easily visually than by hearing it. So the law is going to have to figure out which distinction to go with. But to your second question about the international side of the policy things, yeah, like countries around the world are starting to talk about this. In Japan, leaders are getting nervous about AI and wanting to regulate it. The European Union recently passed some pretty extensive regulations. So we are not the first to be thinking about this.
I think there's a lot of interest in this topic. I think we're all going to be sticking around for a minute during the reception right outside. So why don't we give it a hand to our wonderful panelists. And a special shout out to the Human Artistry Campaign again for being our partners, not just today, but every day. And we are excited to continue the conversation on this important topic outside.